mercy. Yo, Joes! Welcome to the very first Patreon polls video. I finally discovered how to make polls on the Patreon page.
You expect us to believe that?
Hey, cut me some slack, I'm from the 80s. And this first topic was a barn burner. The first vote ended in a three-way tie. But in the sudden death re-poll, G.I. Joe was there. I'm so grateful to all the good brothers and sisters on Patreon for their support, and these polls are another awesome way to let these amazing folks have some influence on what videos I do. I know G.I. Joe existed before the 80s as the 12-inch army doll, or action figure as it's properly known.
G.I. Joe, fighting man from head to toe, on the land, on the sea, in the air.
But to me, G.I. Joe will always be a real American hero.
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there.
It's here, the G.I. Joe collection.
This particular incarnation of Joe lasted from 1982 to 1994 and produced an astounding 500 figures and 250 vehicles, including the largest playset ever built. The line lasted so long, it was supported by 2 different animated series by 2 studios. One of them amazing, and the other was Deke. Today's history lesson specifically looks at the relaunch of G.I. Joe in 1982.
G.I. Joe will return after these messages.
Okay, I feel the need to do this quick public service announcement for the nitpickers, or I'll be seeing
those aren't the 82 Joes in your video, they're the 83 swivel arm versions.
For years to come. I don't own the original 82 straight arm Joes because I prefer the 83 swivel arm battle grip re-releases. So rather than digitally distorting the elbows for the whole video, for the few people who like to ignore entire videos filled with all sorts of information and fun stuff, and just nitpick the one thing that wasn't perfect, let's all just pretend these are the straight arm versions. Remember pretending? It's what we used to do all the time back in the 80s.
Now back to G.I. Joe.
The decision was made to downscale the figures from 12-inch to 3 3/4 inches because of the success of Kenner's Star Wars line. The idea for the relaunch came about, according to Marvel's editor-in-chief at the time, Jim Shooter, from a bathroom powwow between the presidents of Hasbro and Marvel Comics. Marvel didn't just produce the G.I. Joe comic as a commercial for the toys, they breathed life into the toy line. This is why G.I. Joe in the 80s had that same fun and fantastical, yet slightly grounded in the real world feel as all the other Marvel comics. Most people look at G.I. Joe as part of the Hasbro universe, but my G.I. Joe is more part of the Marvel universe. Larry Hama. I feel like I should do an entire episode just on Larry's contribution, but it would be more like 100 episodes. Larry Hama was, is, and always will be the father of G.I. Joe to me. At the time, he was developing a comic book called Fury Force, about an elite special missions force led by Nick Fury's son. When everybody else passed on the project, Larry adapted his Fury Force concept and brought life to all the characters. It was a perfect fit for Hama, who had served in the military and knew all about the genuine lingo and procedures, but had also worked in Hollywood, and knew how to add some sizzle to the steak as well, appearing as an actor on MASH and Saturday Night Live. A much better resume than Stalker.
My only previous acting experience was playing a pumpkin in the school Thanksgiving show.
Archie Goodwin created Cobra Commander, the Joe's arch nemesis, and everything else was Larry Hama in terms of character development. These weren't just grunts.
Go ahead, laugh!
Sorry. Each larger-than-life figure was also grounded in reality with a file name, birthplace, specialties, and bios. Hama's quirky sense of humor ensured that this wouldn't be a grim toy line about the dogs of war. His sense of humor made being all they could be more than a job. It was an adventure. He showed that war wasn't just hell. It could be fun! Okay, but seriously, it portrayed soldiers in a new light. Instead of just having the grim gravitas of being a serious military person, G.I. Joe made them seem like real-life superheroes. Men and women to be admired. Symbols of honor, courage, virtue, determination, and charisma. The concept was straightforward. G.I. Joe was a counter-terrorism unit created to fight the forces of Cobra.
A ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world.
Hasbro spared no expense on the toy line, featuring beautiful, action-packed, almost photorealistic card art on every individual figure and vehicle box. 1982 saw 8 vehicles released, 4 of which included figures, 11 single-carded figures, a carrying case, and a mail-in figure. I still remember seeing these toys for the first time in the toy section at Highway Market in Kitchener in 1982. There had been no cartoon, and I hadn't read the comic yet. I had no idea what G.I. Joe was, but I immediately knew it was special. The true grid on each Joe's face, the exploding background, and the figures themselves. Astounding for 1982, and maybe still even by today's standards.
Will you get out of the picture?
Oh, sorry, stock. These are better than an electric train set. Knees and elbows that bent, swiveling waist, shoulder and hip sockets that allowed for so much more range than Star Wars figures did. And real-looking guns, not laser guns. Tiny, intricate parts like visors for the helmets.
Wow, far out!
Or stands for the heavy weaponry.
Monumental microchips.
And made out of hard plastic. These seem more like miniature, posable models than children's toys. Fearing the bad guys wouldn't sell, almost all of the vehicles were from the Joe Motor Pool.
This cannot be permitted!
The 3 actual vehicles were the Ram Cycle with side Gatling gun, the Vamp Jeep with driver clutch,
Yo, Joe!
and the motorized Mobat tank with Steeler.
You can make it go left, right, forwards, and backwards. The G.I. Joe battle tank.
Smash the blockade! What a tank!
The rest weren't technically vehicles, but that's the term that's generally used for items that came in boxes. The MMS could be towed by the Mobat or Vamp,
So, who do we have to ramrod this operation?
and included the Joe's original field commander,
Who's leader of the Joe team? Hawk.
Colonel Hawk, and the HAL laser, also towable, included Grand Slam. The flat cannon was a stationary gun, and the jump jetpack set was the Joe's first air support.
Thanks for dropping in, Stalker.
In order to give Cobra a fighting chance, commercials featured the snakes stealing Joe vehicles.
Cobra's captured our attack cannon! It's Cobra Commander! He's stealing our missiles!
Later that year, Cobra did get a place to call their own.
Cobra!
The Cobra Missile Command Headquarters was released as a Sears exclusive and included 3 figures: the Cobra Soldier, Cobra Officer, and Cobra Commander. Of the 11 single-carded figures released, 9 of them were Joes. There was the Communications Officer and my first Joe, Breaker.
This is Breaker. Come in.
The Laser Trooper Flash.
The laser cannon's on overload.
My brother's first Joe, Infantryman Grunt.
Count me in too, old buddy.
Heavy Machine Gunner Rock and Roll.
Far out.
The Mortar Soldier Short Fuse.
Right.
The Ranger Stalker.
You were saying?
Bazooka Soldier Zap.
Nothing better than a good kaboom to open up closed doors.
The mysterious Silent Commando Snake Eyes. And Marvel noticed there weren't any females on the team. And since there hadn't really been any strong female characters in the military in comics or animation up to that point, Marvel told Hasbro,
Then we've got to make one.
you hear Red Sonja, Wonder Woman, and She-Ra mentioned all the time in terms of strong female comic and animation heroines of the 80s, but the first female warrior I looked up to in the 80s was the lovely and deadly Shauna O'Hara.
Why, thank you, sir.
Codename Scarlet. 2 Cobras were also released on card, a Cobra Trooper, and a Cobra Officer could be easily found on the pegs.
Yeah, all you need is a garbage detector.
Hasbro had concerns that the bad guys wouldn't sell, so releasing army builders was a way of giving fans an incentive to not just buy one, but multiples.
Tricky little serpents, aren't they?
And Fang Face was released in 1982 as the first mail-in figure, requiring 5 flag points and a whopping 50 cents for postage and handling. Yes, many kids experience the absolute joy and excitement of receiving a toy in the mail for the first time thanks to G.I. Joe in 1982. Asking the mailman,
"What have you brought me? You were expected days ago."
And have been reliving that excitement through eBay, Amazon, and other online stores ever since. Well, some of them. Some don't have as much patience as they had as kids.
I will wait no longer. My patience is ended.
The first issue of the G.I. Joe comic was released in June of '82 and was written by Larry Hama. It's got the same fun, glib vibe of the Sunbow show that would come out the following year, but the stakes are a bit higher. Not everyone parachutes out of exploding aircraft.
G.I. Joe will dare. G.I. Joe.
And there is an actual risk of serious injury or death. After rereading some of these classic early Joe comics, my only question to Hasbro is, why isn't this your G.I. Joe movie? Larry's done all the work for you. It's here. It's great. It's cool. It's magic. Give him the credit he deserves, and use this as the blueprint for your movies. Not a reimagining. Be true. Be genuine. Show reverence. This is timeless. It worked then, and it'll work today, because the themes Hama used are timeless.
Oh, I'd say they all know that.
Then you haven't seen Rise of Cobra, Bumperface. The first year had been a gamble, but with the incredible success of the line, the doors were blown off the hinges for more unique-looking characters, gear, and vehicles, as well as added articulation, going from the straight arm to swivel arm battle grip. But that's a story for the 1983 history video. Got a Joe memory you'd like to share? Scroll down and go to town. Feel free to share the video with your fellow Joes. If you'd like to take part in upcoming Patreon polls, head over to the Patreon page listed in the show notes to get involved. And to join the force, hit subscribe, of course. Yo, Joe!